Hello, everyone. We'll just be getting ready. We're just getting ready. We'll be set in a second here. We'll have the Ultra Rep sign on soon and talk to us all about winter trail running. So just stay tuned and we'll be ready in a second. Hello, everyone. We are just waiting for a few more to sign on. Oh, there is Luke now.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Luke. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and start sharing my video. There we go. How's it going?
Going good. It's going good. So I'm just
All
gonna
right.
put some headphones in. Computer audio is really low for some. But yeah, things are going good. The weather's been a little over the place here. It actually snowed for the first time where I'm at today. So that's a little bit of little excitement there. Again, gearing up for that.
Yeah, we had I guess probably a dusting here, maybe a couple inches here in Binghamton. So it's been interesting.
Yeah.
Starting the winter thing.
Yeah. It's weird. Some days over the last month or so, it's been, I feel like at least over here, it's been upwards of 60 degrees on one day, and then the next morning it'll be like below freezing, and then next day after that, right back up. It's like, what do you want to do today, weather?
All right. Well, I'm gonna click us to get on to Facebook. And so it's just setting up our meeting on Facebook. So we'll have this streamed as well, so we can see anybody who may have some questions on some of the Facebook pages.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, I think let's see. And yeah, here we are. All right, wonderful. We're here. Very good. So I guess we'll get started. I'm Matt Gowers. I'm community relations with Confluence Running, a running specialty store in Binghamton, Corning, and in Goshen, New York, all along the southern tier in the Hudson Valley. And we have with us here today Luke Harper from Altra Running, and we're going to talk about winter trail running and have any questions for winter trail running. And Luke's going to be able to answer those, as well as kind of talk about his own experiences with that. So Luke, I'm going to give it away to you.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm Ultra Field Service Rep. My territory is all of Pennsylvania, from Philly to Pittsburgh. I also cover New York City, going towards upwards of Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, a little bit of all of New Jersey, a little bit of Delaware, and just a little bit of West Virginia. So relatively big territory, but enjoy what I do. Enjoy talking about running. Enjoy talking about the brand. Very excited to be with you guys here, especially talk about winter trail running. Winter is upon us, and it's definitely some tips and things that I think every runner should kind of keep in mind as we go into the winter. I'm a big trail runner myself. Love doing ultra marathons. I'm actually training for a 50 miler that's going to be self-supported. I'm just going to trying to pick my own course and try to run as fast as I possibly can. I'm looking to do that later next year. So right now, just kind of gearing up for that winter training and making sure all the tools are in place to be very successful. Because I've ran in below 13 degrees before and have not been prepared. And I tell you, it's not fun at all doing that. My hands get extremely cold. So figuring out the right pair of gloves is super key. I probably have like 8 pairs of gloves I will rotate through. I'm trying to figure out the best pair for me. Figuring out clothing, also nutrition. I've had my water bottles freeze on me on my long runs. So just playing around. I've learned a lot during the winter times and how to best prepare for training through cold weather. But before kind of diving in deeper, is there any questions or kind of a starting point we should I can kind of go off of first?
And please
If
feel
not,
free to unmute your mic, as well as to place some things in the chat as well. All is acceptable.
If not, I would say one thing that I would highly recommend, something that I find myself doing right now, is traveling to trailheads to get my runs in. Sometimes 15, 30 minutes, just depending on what type of terrain I want to go for. If I want to go for elevation, if I want to go for something more technical, if I want to go for something flatter and easier. And one thing that I'm starting to do a lot, especially as it's getting colder out, is bringing extra pairs of clothes with me. After you go for your run, even if it's cold, I mean, everyone's different. Everyone's going to sweat differently. I sweat profusely. Just one of those runners. So after I finish my runs, if you're just standing still, I tend to do strides after my runs or some type of mobility drills. So after you kind of finish sweating from going for an hour, 2 hours plus, and that cold wind hits you, feel a lot more colder. So one thing I would suggest, if you are finding yourself traveling during the winter months, bring an extra pair of clothes, extra pair of socks, extra pair of pants, extra pair of shirt, even an extra jacket. So once you finish your run, I always have a towel in my car, kind of dry myself off, change into some warmer clothes. And this way I'm able to do those key things after my runs that helps me, reduce as many injuries as I can, like, again, strides and mobility drills specifically. And I'm not freezing while I'm doing that. Also, you're not in the car like blasting the heat up just to try to get warm. So you already have some warm clothes on there. So definitely, if you find yourself traveling, bring a pair of warm clothes with you. For those who are running out there for a couple hours, again, I said my hands get really cold. I don't know what it is, but I cycled through a lot of gloves. So one thing I'll do is use my car as like a little aid station. And one thing that I did on my last run was actually change my gloves through halfway through the run, and that saved my hands tremendously. Because I think I figured out what's going on. It's like when you have your gloves, your hands still sweat, and then I'll leave that sweaty glove on throughout the run. And as the glove gets a little too wet, and again that wind starts to go through, my hands, like, I've had to the point where they hurt, and I've like run with them in my armpits till I get back into something warmer. But like having a drier pair, maybe just even a warmer pair of gloves to switch into if you do find yourself doing that, or if you find yourself kind of having those problems with cold hands, and you can even take that into cold feet, change your socks. I think that is very key.
Yeah, I can definitely relate with that. When you get anything wet, anything wet during the winter, becomes a difficult time when you're running. We had a race during the Pond Hockey Festival in Shenango Valley State Park in Binghamton, and that race in particular, last year it was pouring rain. Now you had snow on the ground. It's 34 degrees. It's pouring rain. We're out there marking the course, and you're standing around. We ran the course. We're standing around. You get cold real quick when you're wet. I'd much rather 20 degrees and snowing conditions than 38 degrees and raining conditions, or it's just a very different dynamic there. Um, Now, there was a question that came in, Luke. So the question is, I've never trail run, so I'm interested in trying it this winter. Are there any must-do tips for newbies? Now, you talked about the gloves and apparel and extra clothes. What else? What else is there out there that just to start trail running, like the first time?
Oh yeah, that is. I like that question a lot because my background is on the track, and I did and dabbed a little bit on the road, but I found a new love for the sport through trail running. And trail running in general was a complete learning curve. It's definitely different than running on the roads on the track. Every single step is going to be different. You're going to be working different muscles. So I used to like laugh and joke around. It was like when I first started trail running, I was running 2 minutes slower than I would on the road, but I felt like I was working 70% harder. And I was like, what is going on? So that's one thing that I would recommend is to just keep in mind out that, especially depending on the trail, if it's very technical, meaning that they have a lot of rocks and roots, or if it has a lot of hills, don't expect to hit your times that you would go on the road, hit on the road on the trail. Some trails can allow that, but sometimes not so much. So just kind of expect to go out there and just run a little bit slower, but try to find your own rhythm. And then once after a while, you get your trail legs, I call them, where you're able to adapt different, paces, but kind of keep that same energy level. Meaning like you're not sprinting up a hill when you should be, hiking or going at a certain distance pace, or you're not using all your energy going down a hill when you should try to be a little bit more conservative. So you kind of get an idea of how your body reacts to the trail and which pace is going to work best for you to complete their entire run. Another
That's actually
thing,
a great point. With effort levels is I find being on the trails myself, it's all about, for me, it's all about stride length, in terms of being comfortable out there on the trails. And this might go to that point of any tips out there for newbies, that your stride length is very different than it is on the road. So Luke, can you talk about a little bit on that?
Yeah, 100%. I say you gotta have like little twinkle toes when you're on the trail, like smaller. I personally tend to take smaller steps when I'm on the trails, just because tend to run more on a technical trail. So when I find myself overstriding, I can hit a rock on my hills or something like in that nature and does not go over so well. I may misstep when I'm overstriding and tend to trip over a rock or a twig or root, whatever, so have you. So I like taking smaller steps, shortening my cadence when I'm running on trails. It just gives me a little bit more comfortability of foot placement. I feel like when I'm getting overstriding, I'm not going to have as much stability to control a little slip up than if my feet were directly under my hips, or under a bent knee, I should say, when I am running on a trail.
Yeah, that's a great point there. I mean, that goes not only winter trail running, but just trail running in general is this concept of love your description of twinkle toes. I teach at Binghamton University and I do a couple of running classes, one marathon training class, one running and health awareness class. And I'm going to absolutely use that descriptor of twinkle toes.
Yes, gotta have to stay light on your feet. Have to have that quicker cadence on the trails. I mean, it helps out so much, especially if you're going downhill and it's so technical. It just really helps out with me. And that just kind of made me go into, I think one of the main points of going into trail running is proper running shoes, good trail running shoes. Now, there are certain trails you can get away with road shoes, if it's just kind of like crushed up gravel or, again, not really too technical. But having something with, good traction, whether that's going to be a combination of the rubber that the shoe uses or the claws, I like to call them, or the treads. Some shoes are going to have more of an aggressive tread. Some shoes may not have more of an aggressive tread. But just kind of, and, I won't go as far as saying one is better than the other. Everyone has their preferences and what they like to feel and how they want to experience their run. So I would, as you buying trail shoes, I would pick the brain of the person who's talking to you about trail shoes and see what they like and don't like and see if that kind of aligns to your experience on running and on the roads and trying out different shoes to see which one gives you that, that space that gives you, that overall comfortable feeling that you feel like you can go out for however long you want your run to be on the trails. But trail shoes are super important. I've seen like just for Spartan races, for example, I've seen people complete Spartan races with like just road shoes and it just finished raining and it's super muddy. I'm like, there's going to be a slip and slide for you. Traction is going to be really key for that. Trying to see what else I was going to go with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, trail shoes, that's one thing where going on grass, there might be some soccer fields that people can go on and feel comfortable with. And that's a great introduction into running onto softer surfaces. Now you kind of have that transition from road to grass, or road even to packed dirt, and then from packed dirt to grass, and then a little bit further from there. And then once you get into more technical with rocks and roots, then trail shoes are a must. I mean, Luke is absolutely right on that one. With trail shoes, and actually Jenna is getting me 2 pairs right now of her Altras. She has the Ultra Escalante Racer, which is this one here, which you can see a much thinner tread on the bottom, much smoother tread for the road. So for faster running on roads. And then she has the King Mountain, which is extremely muddy right now, but that's okay because that's what it's used for. You can see it has a very aggressive tread on the bottom. It just makes your foot more comfortable when going from rocks and roots, and just it's something called sure footing. You just feel better when you plant your foot and you're going to be safe on the ground. I'm definitely a younger person. At 30, 31 years old. So I'm definitely a younger person. So if I plant my foot and I go down, it may not be as big of a deal. Now, my mother is a little bit older. She's 65. If she plants her foot and she goes down, it's going to be a much worse off situation with any slipping. And that's something trail shoes do help quite a bit with that sure footing. So
Yeah, I love how you meant, yeah, sure footing. I think that's key. Just knowing, being confident in the next step, especially when it's, the trail is covered in snow. You may not know if there's a rock under that next step or if there's a root under that next step. And depending on which angle you're coming at, your foot can slide out. And that has happened to me many times. But that's why I'm going on something where I'm really just not too sure what the next step will be like. I want to make sure that the shoe itself is going to be able to really grip and grab no matter what I'm running on. If I'm going over a root, or if I am running over, an ice patch, or just a bunch of snow, or even leaves for this matter, especially as the leaves came down and leaves covered the trails. Sometimes it hides, those spots where you really should probably jump over. I think finding a shoe that's going to give you that best traction is great. And there are some shoes out there. I'm curious how you feel about this, Matt. I think there's some shoes out there that I think will be great for transitioning from road to trail, especially when it comes down to winter running. Because running in the winter, I mean, it can just be a lot of snow on the ground, even if you are running on the roads. But having that extra traction there can give you better sure footing. And then it can also take you out onto a more aggressive trail. So there's definitely avenues to take when finding the right shoe for you. Are you going to be the road going to trail? Are you going to strictly stay on trail? I think answering those questions can help guide you into that right footwear.
I have to disagree a little bit with something where I'm a wimp in the winter with so actually my wintertime shoe, I always look for something that has some sort of Gore-Tex and aggressive tread, and I'll run on the roads with any aggressive tread. So even if I'm not even running trail and I'm running roads in the winter, I'm wearing something that has aggressive tread and even a mid boot cut. So there's one called the Ultra Lone Peak Mid, that it comes up the ankle a little bit. It has waterproofing on it and just much warmer overall, but then it has the aggressive tread as well. So even if it's not a transition shoe, I'm just like, nope, I'm wearing this because I'm going to keep my feet warm. But that's me. I'm just a little bit of a wimp when I get out there in the wintertime.
I understand that 100%, 100%. I think that, yeah, it's just like everyone is different. And I think it's great to figure it out, what works best for you and what's going to give you, like you said, that sure footing.
So we had another comment, not really a question, but a comment on someone, Ken, talked about it's harder to just get started, quote unquote, running in the winter, which is just what just what I talked about. It's harder to get out the door. And I did it last winter, but layers help. Gloves are important too, as we talked about earlier. I use wool socks, and a blended wool glove seems to help with the most moisture problems. I don't know, Luke, what your experience is with the different materials that are out there for socks.
Yeah. By chance, what socks do you carry in the store?
We have used the Features Merino and the Belega mohair, the blister resist.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
So
I This winter I became a huge fan of merino wool. So I think if you can find clothing, whether that's gloves, accessories, socks with merino wool, I think that's perfect. And why I like merino wool is because of their temperature regulation. So merino wool products can hold up to 35% of moisture of their weight in moisture before it feels wet to the touch. And merino wool, it's going to be a long, thin fiber compared to your short, straggly fibers. So that means it can be it can be, interwoven woven in so many different, patterns and creating, this crimping action where it traps in heat. So if you are going into those cold weathers and you want to keep your skin dry, again, merino wool is going to hold in a lot of weight, a lot of its moisture and its weight, and it's going to keep your skin dry and keep all that warmth in. And of course, it's going to be breathable. So once it gets to that point where it needs to expel all that moisture out, it will. So, I merino wool has been a great tool for me this winter. So if you're looking to kind of stay warm, I would definitely check out products with merino wool in there.
definitely. So we got another comment on so actually Dwayne, who's signed into Zoom here, said one thing I have found to work on slippery surfaces is taking an old pair of trail shoes and apply shoe glue and sprinkle tungsten carbon grit in the glue. The glue will grip the ice and give better footing. Just have to be careful there's that the grit is very sharp. Do not wear your shoes inside on hardwood floors. I've never heard this before. This is a great tip. I love it. I've heard everything. Some people use Yak Tracks, which is a product that's out there. I know people have used. There's some other ones that you can. Some people stick shorter screws in the bottom of their shoes and like just drill them in. But that's kind of an interesting tip of mixing in tungsten with shoe glue and putting it at the bottom of the shoe.
That's everyone kind of has like, yeah, their neat little tricks to use. I mean, I've heard people cutting up like milk cartons and using that as like a stone guard into their shoes for a little extra protection. Um, but yeah, I never heard of that one. I'm gonna have to look into that and see how it feels. But the shoe that you showed earlier, the King MTs, if I'm going out on a trail that I'm really not too sure about the footing, it's super muddy, it's super sloppy, or anything like that, I'm wearing the King MTs. It's going to have the Vibram outsole, so it's super sticky, 6 millimeter lugs, so it's really going to drip down into the surface. I love the strap across the midfoot there. So it's going to keep your foot into the shoe. I've had this many times where I stepped into something and my foot came out the shoe. And if you're on the wet trail, not so fun. And also in the back of that shoe, it's going to have like this sharp skin. So as you like lifts up, it's going to cause more friction into it, so it kind of stays in place. But it's smooth. It's smooth touching down. It just only have that friction lifting up. So yeah, I King and T's are like going to be my go-to shoe for any type of terrible, muddy, wet conditions if I want to make sure I have that sure footing. But it's very unique to hear others, innovations when it comes to finding the best traction for them.
Actually, it's funny. I wish I knew about Ultra. Actually, I don't even know if Ultra was around 13 years ago. Um, but during high school, if anybody has ever run at Van Cortlandt Park in New York City, if it's raining and you have the Manhattan Invitational, if it's raining and you have thousands of student athletes running across that finish line, it gets extremely muddy where you're going into shin deep mud and you're pulling your foot right out of your shoe. So that's all I could think about when you're talking about the strap on the King MTs is the just pulling your foot right out of it.
Oh yeah, I've had actually ran in Van Cortlandt before, so I know exactly what you're talking about. You know, my one time that happened recently, it just finished raining, and this park near me is just notorious for being wet all the time. It can rain just once and it'll be wet for the next month. So I went for a run, and I tend to wear some of my shoes a little loose. I don't like it like enough for me if I wanted to kick off really quick without tying it, I can. I don't suggest doing that to your shoes though. Because that's how you can kind of create the holes in the back of the heel and kind of mess up the shoe. So I don't recommend doing that. But I stepped into some mud. My foot came out. For some reason, I decided to wear white socks that day. So my white socks are now brown. And I took that, my foot came out the shoe. All I saw was my shoe like sinking in the mud and then just mud just pouring in inside of it. I'm just like, oh, this is too much. But yeah, so I was like, I learned my lesson. Tie your shoes a little tighter and make sure you got something that's going to stay on your feet.
So you talked briefly, kind of touched on a stone guard. You were talking about stone guard earlier. For all those who are very, very new to trail running, who may have not gone trail running before, what is a stone guard and what happens there?
Yeah, so the stone guard is essentially, like a piece of plastic, I would say. Different brands will use different materials, but it's basically going to be like this sheet of kind of, I'm going to just call it plastic that you have in the shoe. Now, some stone guards are removable, meaning like if you remove the liner of your shoe, you will see like a stone guard piece. I wish I had one near me, a piece of plastic that you can shove in underneath the liner. And the purpose of that is to add a little protection from your foot to rocks or something that's going to may poke up at the bottom of the shoe. And it really depends like on your foot strength on that as well. Of course, you have your barefoot enthusiast who would run on trails barefoot or very close to it and just have that foot strength to handle that. That's not going to be like your everyday runner, right? So you want to protect your feet in some way. Now, some shoes are going to have a built-in stone guard, so you can't remove them. But again, this is going to add that extra protection. So if you are finding yourself to running on something very technical or a rocky trail and just want to protect your feet a little bit more, like if you step on the rocks in the wrong way and kind of go ouch, like that keeps happening, I will look into see if the shoe can have, add in stone guard or find a shoe that has a built-in stone guard. And if you're thinking that having a stone guard in the shoe is going to make the shoe more rigid, that is not always the case. Like our Lone Peaks have a built-in stone guard. I don't think that's a super rigid shoe. And our Superiors have a removable stone guard. I mean, that's going to be a lighter weight, lighter profile, sleeker design shoe for those who wants to fill the trail a bit more. And I think that removable stone guard in that shoe is great because if your feet's tired, throw that in there, add for a little extra protection.
All right. Well, I just want to open it up. If anybody has any more questions, please ask them. We can answer them for Luke. Have it, Luke answer them.
Yeah.
Not answer them for Luke. For Luke answer them. So
I have a question for you though, Matt. What is
absolutely.
your favorite trail/winter gear?
Favorite trail winter gear? Oof. That's a good one. Favorite trail winter gear. Gotta say, you know what? I gotta say it's probably my it's probably my Pearl Izumi running jacket. It was my first running jacket I've ever, like, I really ever had. I got it 7, 8 years ago, and it was really my first introduction into a higher quality product. I have kind of a nostalgic feel for it right now because I've been running in it for this long. And, I never really got high quality products before I started working at Confluence Running. And when I started realizing, wow, quality makes a difference here. When you have high quality products, they don't break down. It has a windproof front to it. It has a breathable back. It has a hood right on it. It's moisture wicking. It has thumb holes and little mittens that you can pull over, and just the most innovative, like one of the most innovative jackets. And it was my first one that I ever had that was higher quality in my life. We had actually the Binghamton University Running Club. We all bought a size run of them, and embroidered Binghamton University Running Club on it. So I'm very, very attached to it. But yeah, I think just in general, I mean, I have a bunch of running jackets, and that's something that I'm like, yep, got to take this in the winter. Like every time I go out with a running jacket. And really I just change the underneath. So I might go with a base layer and a mid layer. For colder days, I may only go with a base layer and a jacket for warmer days. So I maybe add a mid layer for the colder days, but I always go out with the jacket.
I like that. It made me laugh because, like, I definitely have those pieces of apparel, like my first of jackets or pants, running pants. And it's like, I feel like runners can be, at least for myself, can be a creature of habit. So, like, when I know something works and is going to keep me warm for a certain run or, condition, like, that is the go-to. I don't want to have to second guess and play around with something and then I'm cold on my run or I'm hot on my run. Like, I want to be comfortable when I'm out there. So I agree with you. I can relate to you on that one. For me, I would say, just because I mentioned it before, but me discovering merino wool products was a game changer for me. My last run, I had a merino wool shirt on and then a half zip, and some air warmers, gloves, pants. And I went for my run, a little over an hour. And I got back and my half zip was soaking wet. And then I took that off. My shirt it was wet, but usually around that time, like, I can like strain it out and have, water just coming out of sweat, just coming out of that. But this time with the merino wool shirt wasn't like that. But what really surprised me is my skin was dry. And again, like we mentioned earlier, was once you kind of finish sweating and you're in that cold weather and get that wind towards you, like your body temperature can really drop. So I love things that's going to wick away that moisture, that's going to hold moisture in, but that's not going to feel wet always to touch, and it's especially going to keep my skin dry. Again, the worst thing that's going to happen is being cold on a cold run, on a cold day, I should say.
Yeah, just going back. Definitely have a story for everyone. It was early in high school, and my uncle and I went out for a skiing tour around the Northeast. So we went to Vermont, we went to New Hampshire, we went over to Lake Placid, went on Whiteface, and we were staying at a hotel in Lake Placid. And embarrassing moment, but I had to do it, is it was like 5 degrees out, and I, being fairly a new runner in high school, I didn't really have proper clothing or anything of that sort, but I was freezing and I was so determined to get outside. 5 o'clock in the morning before we went out and skied, and I put on snow pants and my ski jacket and I went out and ran. I was like, I'm going to go do this, and it's super cold, but I'm going to do it anyway. But then after, obviously, now discovering, there's actually like tights for this that are super warm that you don't have to wear snow pants. But it's just those memories of when, you know, I first started running and first started learning that, oh, okay, this is something that you can do, but it's not exactly the most comfortable thing to do.
Oh, that's funny. I think we all can have those rookie moments going out on the trails. I'm trying to think of one. I mean, I would I would have to say like it had to be with form. I really had to learn how to run more efficiently on trails, um, especially again with the short cadence. When I first started trail running, I always used to say like if I didn't trip and fall, it was a great run, and I just left it at that. And I'm not meaning like a quick like stumble. I'm talking about like Superman diving from tripping over something. Like that was a common thing for me. But again, once I kind of paid more attention to where I'm stepping at and just having that smaller cadence, um, that helped me out so much in avoiding a lot of bad falls. It still happens from time to time. You know, sometimes you can be in la la land when you're running, just zoned out, and you don't see that, you know, that branch there. But you know, paying attention on the trails is super key.
Definitely. So we have another question. Is there an app or trail run map available that rates the difficulty on trail runs? And she also added, when's the first Confluence running Hudson Valley group trail run?
Awesome.
I'm gonna answer the first one first because I'm gonna poke our manager Chloe down there in the Hudson Valley to get out there and run some trails. She is not a trail runner. She admits that. She will exactly what you were saying, Luke. She does the Superman. She'll trip over a route, does the Superman. So but we will get her out there on some. And then when I come down to visit my mother down in Middletown in that area, I will definitely put together a group run and just, you know, invite some people out. Actually, that's actually a great tip. Little side tangent. A great tip to get out and get a run together just for yourself. So we put on a turkey trot Thanksgiving. Did not want to run Friday morning. Not interested at all. I mean, it was, you know, it's a lot to put on a race, and we're still working and all this stuff is happening. But on Monday or Tuesday, we put together a Facebook event for a group run Friday morning at the shop. And it forced us to go and run from the shop because people were expecting us. Whether or not anyone showed up was a whole different story, but we made that happen. So we gave that ourselves that accountability to go and do that. So I will do that when I come down to the Hudson Valley the next time. We'll create a group run, invite everyone there, and it'll be fun. Some of the Middletown Reservoir trails are really good down there that I've discovered. But in terms of an app or trail run map, Luke, you may be able to speak to this. Binghamton actually has a really good trail running, hiking map with the Broome County Parks Department, and Corning definitely has quite a few trails out there. Even growing up in Middletown, though, in the Hudson Valley, I've actually had a tough time finding a real collective map of all the trails in the area, and really have just been piecing it together over the past 6 months with some of the help from the locals runners club who might go here and there. So I don't know, Luke, if you have any other resources that help with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think my personal number one resource is to find somebody who is familiar with the trails. But that's not going to be always be the case. But if you can find somebody who's familiar with the trails, I think that's awesome. It can save you from getting lost. That was another thing that I had to learn about trail running is to read the markers and knowing what the markers, each marker meant, because I've turned, you know, 4 mile runs into 8 mile runs just because I took a wrong turn somewhere. So learning to read the markers is super key. And if you can have that guide, that would be awesome. But besides that, especially since I, you know, I was traveling quite a bit before, and I was always trying to figure out a new place to run. I use this app called All Trails. Then you can download it if you have an iPhone or an Android phone. It's a free app. It will give you, yeah, probably the screen is bright. Yeah, so it give you all the trails in the area, and it will mark them like the difficulty, like if it's an easy, moderate, hard. It'll give you the length. It'll give you a map of where the trail's at. People can leave reviews on the trail. So if you're trying to figure out and trying to go for a specific type of terrain, you can just look at the reviews and that can help guide you. There is a paid version of All Trails, and I believe what that paid version will allow you to do is to download the map directly on the phone, and you can use your phone to give you like um, point by point direction. So tell you when to turn left, tell you when to turn right. Or if you pay for the app, you can also download the map to a GPX file, and you can put that GPX file on your smartwatch. Um, so if you have a Garmin or a Coros or a Suunto um, watch, I know certain versions will only allow you to download a GPX map, but that helps out a lot.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I wanted to bring it up and kind of scroll through it for everyone, and that was definitely useful. Actually, when I brought up the All Trails site, typed in Middletown, New York, it brought two places that I had never heard of, and I was like, oh, I'm definitely doing those when I go down there. So yeah, definitely a good resource out there.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many little trails are around. No, for me in PA, I feel like all the trails are connected somehow, and it's kind of hard to, unless you run it all, to figure out which trail connects to which trail. But having that app there can help you just connect those dots a bit more, and really enjoy that. And just something randomly that just popped into my head, just thinking about that because of my last time I used All Trails when I was out in Pittsburgh. I was trying to get a run in early in the morning before driving back, and it was dark. So with trail running, and you can even use this on the road as well, but a headlamp. I think having a headlamp is good, and obviously that really depends on what time of the day you run. But sometimes on the trails it can be bright outside, but it's just kind of covered in, and you may just need an extra bit of light. So um, a headlamp is, I think, it's really key for trail running, especially running right as the sun's coming up or it's about to go down.
So another comment that kind of reinforces this is definitely ask locals in your area for trails. That's how he found the ones that he frequents and get a better idea for the difficulty of and if it's worth going.
Yeah,
So and it depends on what you're looking for, right? So in Binghamton, we have different types of trails. Like we have the rail trail and Otsiningo Park, both of which are paved and more gentle, very gentle. And then we have things like Aquaterra, which is considered a wilderness area that has absolutely no services, grass up to your eyes and your head, and used to be a ski slope. So trails all over the place for those different difficulties, and definitely good to talk to people about what their experiences are out there.
yeah. Because some people don't mind bushwhacking through stuff like that. Whereas me, I'm like, yeah, if I have to bushwhack through something, I'm probably gonna find a longer loop around that section. I've definitely had my fair share of running through thorns, and it's not fun at all. And another thing too, like as I'm like drinking water right now, I think that's another key thing I feel like I should mention is hydration, because it's hard to remind yourself, well, at least for me, personally speaking, it's harder for me to remind myself to hydrate when it's cooler outside. When it's hot outside, you're sweating a lot. You're like, all right, I need some water. But when it's cold, you don't get that sensation all the time. But you're still burning, you're still sweating. You still need to rehydrate. So figuring out what works best and what device works best. Again, I've had runs where my water in my bottle froze, and it just wasn't fun after that at all. I ended up calling the run because like I can't even hydrate, no point. But I learned my lesson that certain things freeze, or just kind of how to keep it warm. You may want to have your vest under your overlayer, but have it in such a way where it's like a half sip where you can still kind of sneak and drink your water, but kind of keeping it closer to your body so it stays warm and it's not, it's freezing just from movement in the cold outside. So, but yeah, just as you would hydrate in a hot run, is have that same mentality that you need to hydrate on these winter runs.
Definitely. And actually, I'm going to share my screen here for everyone as well. Just to kind of show, if you're not familiar with any of the equipment that Luke is talking about. So Luke, do you run with a handheld? Do you run with a belt? What do you normally
I
run with as
ran
hydration?
I ran all the above. I mainly use a vest
Okay.
because I tend to carry more with me. That's the only reason. Like I'll have food with me. I may have an extra pair of gloves with me. Sometimes I may get too hot and take out my outer layer and want to stuff it somewhere. Your keys, your phone sometimes. So yeah, I typically wear vests just because I can carry more stuff with me. But I'm not opposed to a handheld. Especially if I'm going for my shorter runs, and it's definitely want to stay hydrated. I love the handheld. You kind of stick your thumb through. You don't have to like grip to hold on to it. Like that Nathan one you just showed, you can keep your hand
You need
relaxed.
this one with the insulation in there so your water doesn't freeze.
Yes. Oh man. Yes. Very key on that one.
We always think, okay, I'll get an insulated one to keep things cold. You never really think, oh, I need to get an insulated one to go the opposite direction.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, I think, main thing that you would typically think about when running in the summer, you still want to think about running in the wintertime, dressing appropriately, hydrating appropriately, you know, figuring out, the right routes for you. If you want to avoid something more technical, or if you want something a little bit more easier, the right footwear for the type of activity you're doing. I think it still applies. Some things can get overlooked because it's so cold outside, but all those key things that you would tend to do in the summertime, I would still think about with winter running. Of course, you're going to have those things you can kind of let go by the wayside, but still some things to consider and think about.
All right. Well, thank you. Does anyone have, I just want to open it up before we let Luke go. Does anybody have any additional questions that they'd like answered? It can be anywhere from beginner to more advanced. He's everywhere in between. So
If you are a beginner trail runner, I'll bring a friend along with you. Let's make it fun. Have fun out there. One thing I love about ultras and trail running in general, I don't think it's frowned upon to walk up the hills. So, I think it's going to save your legs for the runs. Some people are stronger uphill runners, some people are stronger downhill runners. Going downhill can definitely put more impact forces onto the quads. But yeah, out, have fun. Bring a friend. I've seen a lot of dogs out there at times, but I think if you're doing it with a group and just making it fun and not overcomplicating it, I think it can be, a really great experience to be out there in nature and just take, some beautiful sights in.
all right. Well, just seeing if there's any other comments. And well, thank you, Luke, for everything that you talked about, and thank you everyone for those who signed on and those who have been watching on the Facebook Live. And certainly, get out there, get on the trails, and hopefully we'll see you out there.
Thanks for having me, man. This is awesome. I really love the whole setup here. Podcast type feel. This is like my first time doing something like this. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. Hopefully we can partner on something like this again soon.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much. Have a great night.
You too. Enjoy.